Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Real Reading Talk. I am your most gracious host, Ms. Sasha. And with Real Reading Talk, I discuss the real systemic issues that are at the very core, the very foundation, as to why we have low levels of literacy in the Black community and the ways in which we can combat these issues together, y'all. Welcome, welcome. For those of you who are my newbies, I thank you all for joining me. And I just ask this, that you just please, number one, I pray that you gain much benefit. And number two, I pray that you also share the benefit. All right. Remember, sharing is caring, y'all. All right. And for my old heads who have been rocking with me since day one, I started this podcast in 2017. This is right around the time when the podcasting was just starting to, pick up steam and everything. I was out there in them podcast streets, y'all. Okay. But so time went by and then I was able to, I had to take a little break. Life be lifing. And then next thing you know, I was able to come back on the scene and be more consistent with the podcast. Well, this particular episode, you guys, I am going to be focusing on this book here, The Skin I'm In, written by Sharon G. Flake. And I'm going to be talking about the theme. Now, for those of you who have been following, you know that I said that we, meaning me and Ebony Donnelly, we have been working together to put out these episodes where we can help demonstrate ways to help our young people be able to take a deep dive into reading, to help them gain tools, for example, being able to make a deeper connection to the characters who are in a book, so they can be able to describe those characters, go beyond just the physical characteristics. We wanted them to be able to understand how to talk about personality traits, okay? Because these are things, number one, that they should know how to do anyway, so they can just have a deeper understanding of the book. And also, these are things that they ask when they are taking these tests in schools, all right? So we said we want to empower our babies, okay? Because this is an empowerment type of podcast, all right? And then we also said we're going to deal with figurative language as well as cause and effect. And we picked those three because Ebony, this is something, by her being an educator for 23 years, one of the things that she noticed, she said, these three things, and there's some other things as well, but we wanted to focus on those three, were the issues that a lot of our youth struggle with. Okay, so when they're reading these passages or these texts, these books, a lot of times they are not familiar with what a character sketch is. All right, they're not familiar with figurative language or how to be able to articulate cause and effect and being able to understand those things. So we said, well, let's break it down for them so that they can, number one, see that it's not nothing to be afraid of. They can actually do it, and it could be done in a creative, fun, and artistic way. All right, so you all make sure you check that first episode out on the character sketch that we did. But we weren't able to do our other episode on figurative language because we were affected by the storm, all right, that hit us here in Cleveland, right? Northeast Ohio. We was like hit, a lot of folks out of power, including myself, as well as Ebony as well. So we were not able to do the recording. But since now that we are back in business, I had to come on here and make sure that I got our next episode out. She wasn't able to get our next episode out, but we're going to resume with she and I doing our next episode, which is going to be dealing with figurative language. But this episode right here, we are going to dive into the theme, okay? So first I want to do is I want to define what the theme is, okay? The theme is an idea that recurs in or pervades a work of art or literature. So simply put, a theme is what the message that the author is intending to convey throughout their piece of writing, all right? So, of course, with this book, and that's the beauty of when we are reading. Reading is a personal thing, okay? Because when you're reading something, you are bringing your own experiences, your background, you're bringing all the different things in which how your life is into that reading. So just because I may get certain things out of a book, that may not mean you got those things out of the book, okay? However, when you see, again, certain messages that are being conveyed or that are constantly you're seeing over and over again in the book, that's when you know that the author had a particular message that they wanted to send in their writing. So the three themes that I saw that the author wanted to make sure that we did more research on, that we dived into in this book, are these three things, okay? So the first one being the ma'afa, all right? And how do I know this? Well, the evidence shows, number one, page 26 of this book, I believe this is chapter 5. Yep, chapter 5 of this book. The main character, Malika, she is a phenomenal writer. And so she starts writing these diary entries. And these diary entries are of a girl, which is her name spelled backwards with the word, with the letters, kind of flipped around. Her name is Akilma. Okay, so she's writing under the pen name Akilma in her diary entry. And so, but her diary entries are talking about her being on a slave ship. And how do I know this? Well, she says, and she also has a relationship with one of the people on the slave ship, a young boy in her age group. His name is Kinjari. And she says, when I woke up, Kinjari was gone, dead. He had the mark, the pox. The girl chained to me said, sucking her front teeth like they were soup bones. The slavers tossed him over the side, she said. Okay, so that's the evidence right there to show that the author is introducing to us the transatlantic slave trade, what had happened to our ancestors when they were put in the horrible, the most hellish conditions, so that they can become slaves to build up this country, right? And this right here, I thought was absolutely brilliant because number one, I'm gonna tell y'all, a lot of our youth, they are not familiar with the transatlantic slave trade. Now, a lot of them may know about slavery or they've heard the word slavery, but a lot of them don't know what happened when they were being transported across the Atlantic Ocean and they were brought so that they could build up what we have here in America, right? And that is a great entry point to talk about that particular subject, to talk about the transatlantic slave trade or the ma'afa. And the ma'afa, by the way, is a key Swahili word, which means the great tragedy or the great disaster. And this right here is brilliant because guess what? Her talking about this, the author, her bringing this up has everything to do with how the main character, Malika, how she has been being teased about her skin color and how she feels about herself, which brings me to the next theme that the author dealt with, which was the colorism piece. And colorism, that simply put, is when you have a group discriminating against someone based on their skin tone. Okay, so colorism is the discrimination against someone based on their skin tone. Where did that come from? Well, when you talk about the enslavement process, what happened is that white racists understood that in order to enslave a person, you first have to start with their mind. You have to make them believe that they are inferior. You have to make them believe that they are less than, that they are not worthy, they are not beautiful, they are not handsome, they are stupid, anything that you can imagine that's despicable. You have to ingrain that in them. They cannot love themselves in any type of way. That's why they denied our ancestors the right to read and write and study and learn, even though our ancestors came from the continent where literacy was put on a high value, right? You're talking about a lot of our ancestors who were taken from the western part of Africa. This is where you had Mali. This is where you had those great civilizations of the Songhai Empire. All right, you had the Library of Timbuktu. You had all of these different things that were going on where our African ancestors were educated. They were brilliant. They were very well read. They had plenty of books. In fact, books were worth more than gold. So in order to enslave our people, these white racists, they decided, they understood that, okay, we have to make them feel like that they are uncivilized, they are dumb, they are ignorant, they are ugly, all of this beautiful dark skin and these beautiful wide noses and thick lips, all of it, the coarse hair, all of that stuff, that's in the garbage. We have to create this system where white is right. It's the best. It's angelic. You must worship it. Okay. So this is what our ancestors had to deal with, not for 5, 6 years. We're talking about for centuries. We're talking about 400 plus and still going on to this day, by the way, years where our ancestors had to deal with this. So, well, of course, when you are oppressed, what happens? You begin to internalize what it is that your oppressor has told you that you are. You're doing everything that you can to be like that oppressor because it's been beat into you physically, mentally, spiritually, everything, that you are nothing, which means that your dark skin is not worthy. It is ugly. This is why Malika was being teased in the book about her dark skin. She's being, all these negative things being said about her dark skin. And and then she's internalizing this because she does not look at herself as being worthy, as being valuable. Okay? She already had the issues going on where her father had passed. Her father was killed. All right. And so then she was dealing with her mother, who had to try her best to raise her daughter through this horrible thing that had happened to her husband, and she's trying to make it. So she literally is just growing up with a lot of this low self-worth and low self-value, low self-esteem. And then she already knows she's being teased by her skin, not just by one child, but a lot of kids in the school. But so this issue of the colorism piece was phenomenal because guess what? In 2024, we're still dealing with this issue right now. This is an issue right now where I've seen in the schools where you have kids who they'll gravitate more so to that child who has the lighter skin or that child who has the wavier or curlier hair. I've seen little girls, and I'm just telling y'all, it'll just like, oh, eat away at me, right? So they'll be in the class, and you'll have some girls, they'll see a girl, they have one of the girls who may got some long hair or some wavy curly hair, then they'll start playing in their hair. They'll start trying to braid their hair and be all in their hair. And there are times, and I have to tell them, get out of their hair. You shouldn't be doing that. First of all, that from a health standpoint, you shouldn't be doing that anyway. You shouldn't just be in somebody's hair. And we shouldn't we should educate our children and let them know, don't let nobody come play in your hair. Don't do that. But secondly, I know subconsciously a lot of our girls would deal with this issue of, well, they don't like their hair. They don't look at their hair as being something that's of beauty. They don't look at their hair as being uh, good hair because they have coarse hair. You still hear those types of terms. Good hair, bad hair. You got 4C hair. You know, you don't have that grade A hair. You kind of got that low level, that C hair. All right. All of that stuff stems from the slave plantation, which brings me to the last thing that the author was bringing in, which is the post-traumatic slave syndrome, right? So all of this, again, ties in together, just like I talked about with Malika, not looking at herself as beautiful, looking at herself like she's not worthy because of her skin color. Then you got the kids who are teasing her. All of that stuff comes from that post-traumatic slave syndrome. Well, what is that? Well, post-traumatic slave syndrome, and this is something that I got from, of course, those of you who have been following me, you know, I quote from this woman continuously, okay? I'm going to make sure that I'm quoting from Dr. Joy DeGruy because she is the one that coined this term, all right? So the post-traumatic slave syndrome, she talks about these maladaptive behaviors that Black people had to take on because they were in a system of oppression. So when you're in a hostile environment and you're trying your best to survive, you're doing everything that you can do in order to live, right? And unfortunately, there were a lot of habits, there were a lot of things that our African ancestors wind up taking on because they were in a system of the false notion of white supremacy, where white was always right, was always beautiful, was always brilliant. And so in that system, when you have that system, it creates a division because that's the whole point. They knew that if these Africans were together, they worked together, they were thinking together, they were building together, they knew that they would not be able to be enslaved. That's why they created the divisiveness. That's why they started doing the things where they separated them immediately. When they started to take them and capture them from Africa, they started separating them immediately. They knew that, okay, the strength is in the unity. The strength is in them together. So if we divide them, and then on top of that, we make them feel like they are less than, then that's when the enslavement can happen. But unfortunately, one of the things that happened with that is that our African ancestors, what did it create in them? It created in them this divisiveness thinking, this attitude of me, my, individualism, no communal thinking, and also the self-hatred. Well, the oppressor has all the things that I need in order for me to be able to eat, in order for me to be able to have at least the little things that I got to get it from them. I got to get it from the ones who are oppressing me. And so they began to adopt, unfortunately, a lot of this ideology and these behaviors that their oppressor was putting on them, which was self-hatred, which was the lighter you are, the better you are. That's just like on the slave plantation, how you had those who were, our ancestors were raped and they were impregnated by these slave masters. And then they're having these slave masters' babies. So what do you have, right? So you no longer are able to start to see our ancestors continue to have that dark skin. So now you're having these babies who are being produced who have lighter skin now. They have this wavy hair, this curlier hair. Their features aren't as showing the African dominance anymore. You see this, infusion of this European and African, traits, okay, showing up on these babies. And then the lighter you were able to be a little more closer to the slave master. You were able to sleep in the house. You were able to get maybe the better scraps of food, okay? So all of these things are happening. So you understand these things are getting in our subconscious. And the beauty of this book, when she talks about the post-traumatic slave syndrome, is that it started to, when you start to develop these maladaptive behaviors, it started to get built in our DNA, which she called, and which I know she had learned from somewhere else, from another woman, actually. I believe it was a Jewish woman who did this study on epigenetics because she was studying the Holocaust survivors. And I know that Dr. Joy DeGruy referenced her before, and how when you have those who are survivors of those who are oppressed, and especially in our situation as Black folks, you're talking about not only the post-traumatic, then you're talking about after that, the peonage system, the Black Code laws, the Jim Crow laws, the segregation, and just the systemic system of the false notion of white supremacy that we're still dealing with. Our ancestors passed on from generation to generation these negative things that we adapted from the slave plantation. And so that's why you have in this book here, that's why this book is so very, very well written, very creative, very important, is that the author understood that and wanted to address these issues in this book. And that's why I believe this is a great way to a great segue into talking about something important as a topic as slavery, as the ma'afa, as colorism. These things are still going on to this day. And it's extremely important for us to make sure that we are addressing these issues, because trust and believe, these things are still being built in the psyche of our young people. You look at it now, what I'm about to bring up is something, and I'm not trying to be offensive to anybody who does this in terms of wearing wigs, right? Or wearing weaves. But a lot of that, we have to ask ourselves when we have this influx of Black women who have decided, you know what, I prefer to put on this wig or this weave that, is, this straight hair and it's going all down my back. This right here, I'm gravitating more to this because this is what I deem as beautiful. Now, of course, you have some who can argue and they'll say, you know what, well, I just like to change up my hairstyle, right? I like to, it's not that I hate my hair. I just want to put, the wig on because this is something I want to do. I like to, flip it up or whatever the case may be. I like to flip it and bounce it and do my thing. That's fine. But we must be honest with ourselves in terms of that whole aspect of gravitating to the straight hair, this is something that was considered a rites of passage in the Black community as it pertains to our young girls. How do I know? Because I was a victim of that as well. When you got like about 10 or 11, it was like, you got to get that perm. You got to get that hair straightened because see, we got to get them kinky bugs out your head. We got to get that kitchen together, right? We got to get them naps together. I will say this though, we now have seen a lot more of our young people, which I am proud of, wearing their natural hair, not feeling like they have to always gravitate to straight hair. Does that mean that you can't have your hair straight? I'm not in no way saying that. No, you can have your hair any way you choose, right? You can do your hair your way. You can flip it up. It's nothing wrong with that. But I'm talking about it was systemically done to our Black girls in particular, and actually was done to Black men too, because you think about it, Malcolm X talked about that in his book, The Autobiography of Malcolm X, where he talked about getting the conch, I think it's called the congoline, they call it the conch, in their head, hair burning like crazy, because I think it was like straight lye, which, literally like will take your hair out if you don't get it out in time to make the hair straight. So the men were doing that too during a particular time as well, or even the texturizers doing these different things to say, I want to move away from that nappy or coarse hair. All of that stems from the post-traumatic slave syndrome. And if you don't understand it, please make sure, again, I highly implore that you get this book because this is a real issue. This is something that we are still dealing with to this day. It is not just hair and skin. We're talking about a plethora of things that in the Black community, some of the negative maladaptive behaviors that we've carried from our ancestors being enslaved. And that stuff was passed on from generation to generation. And just like it took centuries for it to happen, it's going to take some centuries for us to get rid of a lot of these behaviors that we have taken on because we were in an oppressed state. All right. So with that being said, I want to go ahead. I'm going to end on that note. But again, this book right here, The Skin I'm In by Sharon G. Flake. Number one, I highly recommend that you read it. And number two, this episode was focused again on the themes that I got that the author was trying to impart to the reader, which was number one, talking about the Ma'afa, which is the transatlantic slave trade. How do we know this? Like I said before, with Malika writing under the pen name Akilma, and she is talking about her as well as another boy that's on this slave ship. All right, so that's the first thing. The number two, the colorism aspect, where you have her being discriminated against, being teased, being just totally made to feel like she's nothing because she has beautiful dark skin. And then, of course, number three, the post-traumatic slave syndrome, again, which ties into the colorism piece, because, again, when you talk about in the Black community, where you have those who are deciding to mock, make fun of somebody else who was Black because of their skin tone, that is a sign of self-hatred, which is, again, that is something that has happened to our African ancestors. The message of self-hatred, the message of looking at yourself as not beautiful, not handsome, and ignorant, and all of those other things. And again, this ties into just like why I started this podcast, Real Reading Talk, and how I talk about the real systemic issues. And I called it Real Reading Talk because I want to talk about it in a non-sugarcoating way. And one of the unfortunate things that has happened as to why we see these high levels of illiteracy in the Black community is because when it comes to reading, when it comes to studying, when it comes to research, this aspect of feeling like, well, I don't need to read. Reading is boring. I hate reading. Why do I gotta read? These are things that I've actually heard from our young Black children's mouths. Or when I've heard adults say, when I'm trying to give out books, when we're giving out books in the community through our nonprofit organization, ABC Read, and I'll hear adults say, yeah, I don't read. I'm good. I don't want, I mean, literally hearing adults say this. That stuff, it has a root cause to that. When you were told that you can't read, you can't learn, you were going to get killed, you were going to get your limbs cut off, your eyes gouged out because you was trying to read, and you know you need to survive, and you sitting up there, you trying your best to do everything you can to live. Well, guess what? This is what happened. Our Black folks, they were like, no, I'm not, I ain't about to be trying to go read. Now, of course, a lot of this, the idea of when, especially when our ancestors, when slavery was quote unquote over, and they understood that, okay, you know what, man, we gotta, make sure. And even before slavery, let me skip back. Even before, when our ancestors were enslaved, just like how Frederick Douglass, when he had started learning how to read from that mistress, he understood that reading was linked to his liberation. He understood that. And so that's when he said, oh, I got that thirst. She, like her husband told her that she can't teach me no more. I'm going to do everything I can to learn it, because he got a taste of it. He understood that reading was going to be linked to him being able to escape the plantation. Okay. So you did have our ancestors who were trying their best. However, again, when you have laws put in place to where even after slavery, I mean, even they had developed those the anti-literacy laws, and then they had the laws in which when during Jim Crow, when you had our Black brothers and sisters were not able to go to the libraries were off limits. So all of this stuff is a carryover as to why you see right now where you still have issues and pockets of our Black youth saying things like they hate to read. I ain't about to be reading no books, forget all of that. And especially now we dealing with these, it's like, come on. So it's a real thing. And that's why I have the podcast and addressing these issues. And I just hope that you all are gaining benefit and understanding and continue to rock with me. I hope this episode was beneficial. And I want you all to make sure, again, you like, subscribe, share, comment, and hit the notification bell. And just keep remembering to read for at least 30 minutes a day. All right, y'all. All right, you guys. I hope that you all gain much benefit from that episode. That's one of my favorite topics to address, which is the post-traumatic slave syndrome, and talking about how this sick demonic system has totally corrupted our people. But guess what? We are resilient. We know how to push through. We are the definition of grit. Okay? So we will make sure that we will fight back against and eradicate these high levels of illiteracy that plague our Black community. Okay? If you need a reading tutor, make sure you go to abclearntutoring.com. I'm a reading tutor for pre-K through 4th grade. Also check out our website, abcread.org. I founded the organization, ABC Read, and our mission is to develop and nurture a culture of literacy in Black and underserved communities. And we have been doing this for 10 years, y'all, okay? And make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, Reading is Freedom. So soon as I get these episodes out, you will be able to receive it as long as you hit that notification bell. And last but not least, bam, check out Reading is Freedom, okay? Check out, bam, where you at? Where you at? Make sure you go to readingisfreedom.store, okay? All right, so as you all see, the theme, reading, literacy, empowering Black folks. This is what I do. And I appreciate you all for rocking with me. And I want to leave you all with last two things. Number one, the book that I've been reading and that I'm almost finished reading, The Coming. I highly recommend this book. And this book is a fictional novel that speaks to, which was a beautiful work from the Professor Dr. Daniel Black. And he is talking about the horrors of what our ancestors went through when they were being captured to be thrown into slavery. All right. So this book right here is heavy. It is something else. So, but I highly, highly recommend it. All right. And then I want to leave you all with a quote by Dr. John Henrik Clarke, which is, if you start your history with slavery, then everything else will look like progress. Stop doing it, y'all. We must talk about pre-colonial Africa. We have to make sure our kids know that. All right, you all, thank you. Take care. And please remember to keep reading for at least 30 minutes a day. I am Miss Sasha. Thank you all for listening to another episode of Real Reading Talk. Peace.